Megachurches are not gay affirming or trans affirming by default. They gather diverse groups of people in the suburbs they plant themselves in, and it gives the appearance that they're progressive leaning. They attract these people with a hipster culture, many youth programs, and just a general presence that gives you the impression that they have the solution to your problems. They have big reputations, that's why they're so disingenuous. They appeal to both young progressive people and old conservatives, and everyone in between. So they avoid talking about polarizing issues on their big platforms. They instead reveal their views on a personal basis, ensuring that they keep their unassuming and ambiguous public presence. Mega churches like Bethel, Hillsong, Elevation Church, Lifepoint Church, Church of the Highlands, and many more are either not gay affirming or don't have a public stance on it. And watch out for those churches that don't have a public stance, because they're not gay affirming. And I can tell you how I know this with my personal story. I've condensed this story as much as I can, and I'm gonna try to make it as quick as possible. My family started going to this mega church called Lifepoint Church when I was about 9 years old. We got really invested in it. After going to the church for a little while, I ended up going to the middle school small groups with some pressure from my mom, and then started leading in youth worship. Next thing you know, I'm taking it super serious, and I get involved with a lot of the student leadership stuff. I ended up leading worship at the big student events. I spent about 3 years doing this, but on my 15th birthday, I was outed to one of the leaders who was over the students at my campus. And this woman was friends with my mother, but instead of going to my mom or going to me saying, hey, somebody is spreading a rumor about you, she went straight to one of the high up pastors. Yes, there is a pastor hierarchy at this place. This is where things get interesting though. So these leaders never asked me personally if it was true that I was gay. I was instead pulled out of all of my leadership roles and put in a character development program. I was told that I had a lot of potential and that they wanted to spiritually pour into me. And they didn't want me to have any leadership distractions while I was being spiritually poured into. But they said after this process, I could go back to leading and I'd ideally be more spiritually strong. And I felt honored, like I was getting some sort of special treatment. They told me they didn't do this for everyone. I wonder why. I mean, I got one-on-one sessions with this pastor who was unavailable to lots of people. I got invited to songwriting sessions, and then they also wanted me to go through Freedom Group. Freedom Group is like a curriculum-based small group, which is set up by the Association of Related Churches, or ARC for short, and it's meant to give people the tools they need to find freedom from their personal struggles through Christ. Anyways, back to the situation with the pastor. The pastor was very busy, and after a little while, he just dropped me. We just were no longer in contact. 5 months after we lost contact, I ended up finding out why I was pulled off of the worship team in the first place, and I was devastated. But because the church was my only place of safety, I kept going back. For the first 3 years of high school, I was homeschooled, and so the students at the church were my only friends. It was my only place of community in general for those 3 years. And sadly, at this point, I came to the alarming conclusion that my sexuality was something that needed to change. I mean, it makes sense looking back. Every authority in my life was telling me that it was wrong, and they had scripture to back it up, and I believed that scripture. And I also subconsciously knew that I would earn back their approval if I wasn't attracted to men. So the next thing I did was I went through Freedom Group. And the way Freedom Group is designed is that you have the small group with everyone together at the beginning, and then at the end you have individual prayer with the leaders of the group. And so I would have one-on-one prayer with the male leader. And for 3 months, I prayed with him that my sexuality would change. Now, that is now illegal in the state of Virginia, but it wasn't at the time. And to remind you, I was 15. But after that experience, I realized finally, after years, my sexuality is not going to change at all. Doing that gave me sort of the permission to explore my beliefs and challenge them, because I'm like, if I'm going to suffer like this, I have to know that this is the right thing. And so I did challenge my beliefs, and I had a huge change of heart. And so I ended up leaving the church altogether. So my point of telling the story is not to cancel Lifepoint Church or to cancel any mega church. I still do outreach projects with Lifepoint Church just because it's a really easy way to get involved with my community and to make a difference and to help out. And I think that's a wonderful thing. There are food banks in our area that said that they wouldn't be standing at all without Lifepoint's donations. My intention with announcing what church this happened at is just to make it known that this has happened at that church, and specifically to make it known to queer and trans people that this stuff does happen at these churches. I know I, as a queer person, was more in need of guidance than most other people because I couldn't turn to my parents for a lot of things, and I think queer people and trans people in general are more vulnerable to being manipulated by these types of organizations. Now, there have been times at Lifepoint Church where trans people have been asked to use private bathrooms instead of whatever gender they identify as, and they would make special accommodations for the trans people. And the same thing that happened to me with the whole like taken off of leadership, put into like individual programs, stuff like that, that has happened to other people. I've heard stories from other people saying that that has happened to students at the church. So I know that my case wasn't an isolated case. So I did my part, and I made an impact. I originally talked about this on TikTok. and I like put it all out there. And the church got a lot of backlash. The only reason I took the video down was because people were changing the narrative of my story to something crazy, and I couldn't deal with that. But regardless, the hundreds of thousands of interactions on their Instagram account led one of the executives to reach out to me, and I had a meeting with them, and the meeting went great. The person I talked to was on the same page as me. She asked me what I want to be different about Lifepoint, and I said I want there to be strict policies that prevent leaders from praying with minors about sexual sin. And the person I was talking to was like, okay, that is, you know, that's a perfect idea, and that will happen immediately, like no questions asked, that's happening. So I'm hoping Lifepoint will continue to be a culturally safer place this point moving forward. I don't go to that church. I'm not a Christian. I mean, I could go there and like ask around and do like a Lifepoint church review, but I don't see why I would do that. Plus there are some faces that I don't want to see walking through those doors, so. But I want to make one thing clear. Even after I said those things, right? Like they have those policies in place now that prevents that sort of thing that happened with me from happening again. They are still not gay affirming, and they are not trans affirming. They're accepting of those groups of people, but they still view it as sin. You can volunteer on Sundays. They'll take your free labor. They don't mind you doing that. In fact, that church would not stand without the volunteers. In fact, they know a lot of the volunteers would leave if they knew that the church wasn't gay affirming. So they'll accept your free volunteering from gay people, but they won't allow you to be in leadership positions. So if you want to do worship, if you want to be a teacher in the kids areas, if you want to lead any type of team, if you're on security and you end up getting the opportunity to lead security, no. Like, you can't lead any sort of groups of people if you're gay or if you are transgender. So I just want to make it known, because Lifepoint does not tell you that publicly and directly. I will make it public for them so that you know. And that applies to pretty much every mega church. Like, I'm not kidding you. None of America's 100 largest churches are gay affirming. Let me read you the statement from Hillsong. Hillsong Church welcomes all people, but does not affirm all lifestyles. Put clearly, we do not affirm a gay lifestyle. And because of this, we do not knowingly have actively gay people in positions of leadership, either paid or unpaid. I recognize that this one statement alone is upsetting to people on both sides of this discussion, which points to the complexity of the issue for churches all over the world. So I hope that answers some of your questions about what these big churches are like. These are not progressive churches. They have progressive leaning ideas in some areas, but for most of the part, these people are conservative Christians. But yeah, anyways, I really just don't want a story like this to be pushed under the rug and for this to not be public information. So thank you so much for watching all the way through, and I guess I'll see you in my next video. I don't know if I'm gonna do this YouTuber thing, but who knows.